All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees. Welcome to the podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out the Billy Dees podcast before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. And you can find our podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, on down the line, TuneIn, many, many more. And one of the reasons why I always tell people where they can find the podcast, even though they might be listening to it already, as odd as that may seem, we are getting picked up by more and more carriers. And sometimes people just stumble across our show. So I want to make sure they know the name of the podcast and where they can find us normally. And we have been picked up by a very large carrier, and I want to welcome any new people who are listening to our podcast today. Now, I hope I am saying this correctly. All right. It is spelled JIOSAAVN. And from what I've been able to research, it is pronounced G-O-Savin. Okay. And they are a very large Indian online music streaming service. So we want to say hello to anyone who may be listening to us for the first time. Thank you very much for having us. We so appreciate it. Last week, we touched a little bit on the Joe Rogan Spotify deal, and I kind of went into some broad analysis, I guess, of podcasting in general. I'm going to follow up with that today. And we're also going to talk a little bit about SpaceX and some of the things that happened there over the weekend. But before we get into that, needless to say, the George Floyd tragedy out of Minneapolis has gripped the country. And just prior to going into production for this week's podcast, I struggled with whether or not I should go into it. There's a part of me who feels very obligated to speak about this, because it has impacted so many people. And at the same time, though, the situation is still unfolding. And I feel there are some very important voices that were directly involved and impacted by what happened in Minneapolis. And I feel that their voices should be heard first. And this situation is also very fluid. It is unfolding day by day. So I decided, yes, I should talk about it, but to go into it in detail, the time just isn't right. But it does absolutely deserve our attention, and I did prepare a commentary, and I'm going to play that for you right now. Our country has been shocked by what happened in Minneapolis over the course of a now notorious period of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. In the days that have followed since, protests have erupted all over the country. There has been such a dichotomy in the various videos that have surfaced during this time. There have been very poignant images of police officers and protesters hugging each other. There has also been very good points and information brought forth by the discussions and the various speakers at these events. Simultaneously, the already tragic events surrounding the death of George Floyd have been exploited by opportunistic individuals who want to riot, loot, and further increase the tensions in our fragile society. Political opportunism has also risen its head. It seems that pandemics and tragedies of any kind are not above being wrapped up as political fodder. The past few days have produced many conspiracy theories and fueled fear and distrust of the media, governmental officials, and even our fellow citizens. It is for these reasons that I have avoided going into this topic into any great detail at this time. For one, I do not want to disseminate information that may be wrong. And secondly, I do not want to cover these tragic events as a method of generating content for the sake of this program. The events surrounding this situation are currently still fluid and unfolding day by day. After some time passes and the voices that need to be heard on this topic at this trying time have their day, I may choose to provide some commentary. In the meantime, my only 2 cents is to please not be too quick to react to information and images that you may run across. Over the course of my lifetime, I have attended very diverse schools, and I have worked with a cross-section of society over several decades, over a number of what must be in the thousands of my associations. I have not knowingly been aware of any member of a hate group or at the same time someone who participated in a drive-by shooting. And I would be willing to bet that that is the case for most of you. The number of people who actually participate in these kind of activities in our country that numbers over 300 million is actually pretty few and far between. Yet, the images of crime, the images of hate, seem to permeate the media and our pop culture. The vast majority of us want the same things out of life for ourselves and our children. We wish no ill will toward anyone, and we obey the law. I am not much of a conspiracy theorist. However, it does seem odd how we are fed certain stories. There is an old axiom from nobility that goes something like this. If the poor become too much of a problem, we can always convince half of them to kill the other half. The masses always seem to fall for it. I implore you, please, give everyone a chance during this time to speak and receive their words without judgment. Let them speak their truth. Also remember, the worst lies are the ones that are half true. It gives these lies merit. Yes, figures don't lie, but liars figure. Take in all the information you can from various sources. Be calm. Love one another. May peace for our country and justice for George Floyd prevail. Thank you. All right. Last week, we were talking about the reach of podcasting, and this came up largely because of the announcement last week of Joe Rogan and his enormous deal with Spotify. And if you missed it in a nutshell, or if you don't follow news about the media, Joe Rogan is a very successful podcaster, and he has signed an exclusive deal well into the millions with Spotify, and it's going to make him exclusive to Spotify later this year. And I was talking about, or at least I touched on, the impact of audio. And I am so glad that podcasting and voice in general has become large again, because, you know, I have always felt that the spoken word and the fine recording of the spoken word, for instance, on the radio or what have you, even though you record audio with video, it's different. You're in front of the camera. There's some distance between you and the audience. Generally, with video mics, it's a lavalier microphone or a pin-on or something. With professional audio, your voice travels just an inch or so, and it goes into this great microphone, and it goes directly into someone's ear. And I just feel the power of communication vocally is so wonderful. It's an art form because you can't rely on graphics. You can't rely on your looks, good or bad. If you're a comedian, if you present yourself in some crazy manner, that's not going to help you with audio. You can't rely on gestures. You can't rely on any of these things. You have to rely on your ability to speak. And, of course, not every show is going to give you insights into the universe. That's not where I'm going with this. But all of us here, and I say all of us because there's a number of people, we have a pretty consistent group of people who co-host this program with me. We have some great guests, some absolutely fabulous guests. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. There's one coming up next week. And the support group that I have professionally and in my family around what I do here is so great. A lot of people behind the scenes. And I just feel that I'm so glad this medium works, that this medium has found a solid footing, as evidenced by this enormous deal that went on last week with Spotify. So I'm very happy about all of that, and I'm very passionate about the art form of the spoken word. And we're going to do some things here. If you are new to the program, just to let you know, we basically produce, I would say, one show a week. And generally the new shows land on Tuesday. Now, we do go live here from time to time, and that is Monday evening. We don't always go live, but when we do, it's Monday evening at 8 p.m. And, of course, that show, the replay of it, debuts on Tuesday and plays throughout the week. So I like live podcasts very much. I believe that they have a certain discipline and they have a certain feel to them of talking directly to the audience. And the show last week was live, and that's something that we are definitely going to do some more. We are also going to do some Facebook Lives in the near future, simultaneously with those live podcasts. That's coming up within, I'm not sure about the time frame, but relatively soon. And we're also turning our attention more to YouTube. And a lot of the stuff that we are doing in the broadcast booth, so to speak, is going to be videotaped and available on YouTube. We're also changing around the studio setting here and allowing for more room and some other things, because I really feel that this increases engagement with the audience, and that is so important. But with all of this stuff going on, trust me, the emphasis will always be on audio. The emphasis will always be on the spoken word. Next week, Dorothy Rosby. Now, you might remember that name. She is a pretty frequent guest to the podcast. She's been on, I believe, at least 2 other times. And she has a new book out. And if you're not familiar with her, a very successful humor writer. And we'll talk more about all the places that you can find her work next week when we have her on. But she has a new book out called Alexa. Let me try that again. Alexa's a Spy and Other Things to Be Ticked Off About. And this is a collection of humorous essays on the hassles of our time. So lots of fun there. Also, too, coming up this Wednesday, okay, it's not going to be here, but I am, for those of you who are interested and you follow new books, a gentleman by the name of Don Ake, also a humor writer, comedian, so on and so forth. He has a book out called Turkey Terror at My Door. Now, that's about some turkeys that were showing up at his house, and he's turned it into a whole routine. This coming Wednesday, if you want to search that out, Don Ake, Turkey Terror at My Door. I'm going to be helping him out on his page with a live on Wednesday. If you don't want to find that, that's fine. I'm surely going to have some pieces of it on our YouTube channel, Billy D's Podcast on YouTube. And if it works out, I can't always get good audio from those things, but if it turns out that I get some really good audio bites, I will have them on the podcast as well. Just a couple more shout outs here while we're moving forward. Naturally, I'm from Ohio, and most of the listens of the podcast are in the United States. Okay. And most of those center around the northeast part of the country. But I got to tell you, we have some interesting places listening in, and I do want to shout out to them. So please allow me to do this. Mountain View, California. And oddly enough, I get a lot of listens from California in general. But for some reason, Mountain View, California has lit up. Okay. So I want to thank all of the people from Mountain View, California for listening to the podcast. And also the Russian Federation. For all the folks out there that are finding this podcast, hello, hello, hello. And there's one more, and I kind of know why. All right. Israel, I've had some listens, and I kind of know why. There's a podcast service called Audio Burst that I hear again. I've also recently linked up with, and I'm pretty sure they're either headquartered or have a large staff in Israel. So I have a feeling that some of the folks from Audio Burst are checking out the show, and I want to say hello to all of you. All right. For many of you who are longtime fans of the podcast, or maybe followed me when I had the blog a number of years ago, you know that I really am an enthusiast of space and space science. And the SpaceX rocket took off a few days ago, and it was a success. And of course, if you don't know, SpaceX is the company that is owned by Elon Musk. And it's a joint venture between SpaceX and NASA, which of course is a United States administration. So it represents the merging of private enterprise and NASA, and going up to the international, and I stress international, space station. Now, 2 astronauts went up, and of course this was nervous because human life is at risk, but it all went well. 2 astronauts, Robert, I hope I'm saying this name right, Benkin, and Douglas Hurley. Now, they were aboard the crew. They were the crew of the SpaceX Dragon capsule. And it took them a little while to link up power and an airtight seal. But it was all successful with the International Space Station. And from what I understand, they're going to be up there about 3 months. 3 months. And along for the ride, they took a glittery dinosaur. And they had some shots of the Apollo program control in the capsule, and then they had the space shuttle, and then they showed the Dragon aboard this mission. And it was amazing to me how sleek everything has gotten with all the digital touch screens and all these other things. It's really amazing to me that we've gone now several generations into space flight and space travel. I know there are those out there who don't understand why we should be spending money on going into space, on going back to the moon, and ultimately going to another planet, which will be Mars, if and when that day comes. It seems like we've been anticipating this. Us fans of space have been anticipating this so long. We're like, why has this taken so long? We want to go. And I understand the concern about cost, but you also have to keep in mind that on a practical level, if you consider the amount of governmental waste, and I mean waste, that we produce, the space program, by and large, has paid enormous dividends, and it isn't always directly associated with a return on investment. But what it has done in a broad sense, first of all, microprocessors were largely developed for the space program. And just consider what that has done, not just in terms of the phone that you carry around, but in the way we process information, the way our world works. GPS, satellite, all these things have come from space sciences, medical advancements in terms of how we've studied the human body to understand how it works in weightless situations, and the medicines that were developed because of a weightless environment. We can produce weightlessness on Earth for short periods of time, but up on that space station and on the shuttle in the past, we've been able to do things on a prolonged basis in a weightless situation. Firefighting, the firefighting materials, both in terms of what's going on in your neighborhood and what's going on at your airport. All have benefited from the space program. Weather prediction. All of the things that go into how we predict the weather and predict storms and save people's lives have all benefited by the space program. Aerodynamics. I could go on and on here with all of the things that have not only benefited our economy, which of course is important, but it has helped us as human beings. It has helped us live longer. It has helped us enjoy life more. It has changed the way we communicate. And here's the part that I've never understood. I mean, I don't understand why it doesn't have more of an impact. That part of it alone would, to me, it's so enriching and satisfying. I'm so passionate about this. But then there's a philosophical aspect of this too. Imagine, getting back to the problems that we're having here on Earth right now. Imagine if all of us would have a chance to stand on the moon, and there was this ball about the size of the moon in the sky that was the Earth, and the fragility, the Earth against this expanse of vastness. Wouldn't that give you a sense of how we're all in this together? Is there really that much importance in all of the borders? Is there really that much importance in race? Is there really that much importance in socioeconomic status? Why does all that stuff matter so much? That little ball that's up in the sky, that would be up in the sky if we were out in space, checking out Earth. That little spaceship, that little blue ball has produced every life that we've ever known. And the air that we breathe, no new shipments of air have been brought to Earth. No new shipments of water. There isn't some giant UPS space truck that replenishes our Earth. We rely on a system of decay and renewal. And the same system that supports us on that blue ball has supported every living thing that we know of that has ever lived, whether it be Napoleon or Julius Caesar or Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's how vital that ball is. And I'm kind of folding this into what we talked about earlier in the podcast. With all that is happening right now, the understanding of our world, the importance of life, the fragility of life. If you live to be 80 or 90 years old, that's a long time. You're lucky. A lot of people don't make it that far. All right? That's only 80 or 90 trips around the sun. That's it. Out of all the billions of times that the Earth has gone around the sun, all we get, if we're lucky, is 80 or 90 trips. And that's it. You're done. Your ride's over. Next. And it should be so important to us that we work so hard to make sure that all of us, all of our fellow people, and all living things on Earth. I'm a humanist in that regard. I feel that all life has value. I love animals, and they're on the same ship that we are. And we should value the resources that we have on this Earth. We should value all life. And I would say as human beings, we should be spending our time making sure that since we only get 80 or 90 trips, if we're lucky, that each one of those people, each one of those souls that are going around that ride, around the sun, that each one of those trips around the sun is as pleasant and as love-filled as possible. So to me, I get so much more out of our venture into space than a rocket ride or some science fiction, thing. There's so much about our world. Our world does not end at the top of the atmosphere. What's up in those stars and everywhere else is the source of what gave us our world, and it's all a part of where we live. Every bit of it is. So I would say that's one of the things in the contrast with this weekend. I'm watching the protests and all the pain and sorrow that's going on in this world, on this earth. And the SpaceX program was going on, and I just wish that more people could share in the humanity of the world that we live in, the place that we all share, the kinship that we should all have. So if you don't, if you don't hear anything else that I'm really saying about the space program, kind of remember that, please. That's kind of where I come from as a person. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite scientists, Carl Sagan. I'm going to leave you with that quote. But before I get into that, I do want to remind you that next week we won't be live. Okay. Next week, if all goes well with the scheduling, Dorothy Rosby will be here on the program. We're going to talk about her book, and that will be a studio production. Okay. And when we go live, the Billy D's podcast, follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy D's on Twitter. And we also have the Billy D's podcast page on Facebook now. And we're trying to cultivate that and do more with it. And if we go live, on any week that we go live, we will announce it several days ahead of time on Twitter and Facebook that we are going to be live. And of course, if you miss it, it's no big deal. We do the lives Monday night, and Tuesday it's up. So Tuesday, either a studio production or the recorded live podcast plays for that week. There are times when even more episodes come out, but at the very least, we really try to stick to that schedule of one a week. Okay. This is, I'm going to leave you with this. I don't know if it's 100% quoted correctly, but I'm going to read it more with feeling than I am 100% accuracy. And to me, the feeling of this is much more important than where all the periods and commas go. So I'm going to leave you with this. Our planet, and this is Carl Sagan, one of my all-time favorite scientists, the late Carl Sagan. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. Like it or not, for the moment, the earth is where we make our stand. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy D's from the self-titled Billy D's podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy D's. I am Billy D's. I'd love to have you listen in.